As I look in the book of Job, we all know Job's story, what happened in Job chapters 1 and 2. We know that Job fell on some very hard times, much like a lot of what's happening today. People are falling on hard times. Perhaps today we would describe his situation as one day things are up, the next day things are looking down. What could have gone wrong in such a short time in the book of Job, chapters 1 and chapters 2? A matter of fact, in the first 2 chapters of Job, you see where Job has lost a whole lot. He has lost a lot of things materially. He lost all family-wise. And losing things family-wise now today, we see in our newspaper on a given Thursday, a husband and wife. We see a mother and children. We see more than one person out of a family dying today from this pandemic. Sometimes whole families are lost. But Job lost it health-wise. He lost the support of his wife. And I'm not saying that his wife was not faithful or anything like that, or if I say faithful, she's not supportive, I meant not faithful, not supportive. But he lost her support. She see what was going on with him. He lost all sense of worth and dignity. He is losing his comprehension of God's justice. And he think he has lost his love for God. In Job chapter 1 and verse 21, he says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord take it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In verse 22, it says, "In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly." Job lost his prosperity. He lost his 10 children. Can you imagine that? You have 10 children and lost all of them one time? Can you imagine walking and knocking on 10 caskets? He lost his health. His wife counseled suicide, and his friend who came to comfort him did the exact opposite. As we see patient Job in chapters 1 and 2, in Job chapter 2, verses 9 to 10, his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast on your integrity? Curse God and die." But he said to her, "You speak as one of those foolish women speak." You know, they're none of them measure of hope today. They won't tell Job that. "Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. We see a long-suffering Job. We see a Job who blesses and praises the name of God in the middle of terrible adversity. But beginning with chapter 3 is a transitional time, and we now encounter a Job who is profane. The same man now steps into a whole new frame of reference. He curses the day of his birth. He asks God, if it's all up, if it's all right, just let me die. He gives up. And the patient Job in chapter 1 and 2 becomes impatient Job in chapter 3. As we look now at chapter 3 of Job, my Bible says here, the little writing above says, Job's first speech, his deep discouragement. You see, in this third chapter of Job, it is one of the most depressing chapters in the Bible. There's no one that I can think of who would like to say that Job chapter 3 is his or her favorite chapter in the Bible. I don't know of anyone who has even memorized a verse out of Job chapter 3 with its 26 verses. You see, it's here that the scabs are pulled from the sores as the pus of reality run down Job's life. This is where one spiritual life has been knocked into a spiritual coma. In chapter 3, verses 1 to 10, Job complains about the day he was born. In verse 11 to 19, Job complained of those who were present at his birth for their tender attention to him. In verse 20 to 26, he complains of his life. You see, in this chapter, Job doesn't seem like a man of God anymore. He even has the audacity to say at the end of verse 26, I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil. Here in this chapter, we are given the entrance into the dark side of Job's life that is as real as any of our lives today. But the difference is Job let it all out. Thankfully, he reminds us that even the godly can get depressed. Don't let people fool you. You say you're a Christian. We live a godly life, but we can still get depressed. You see, Satan loved to play mind games. I remember a sister at Johnson Park Church many years ago, Sister Dean. I think it was Sister Mary Dean was her name, the old lady. Sister Mary Dean. She told me, I used to visit all the time, and she told me, I was well up into my 40s at that time. And this was before I was born. She was telling me that the doctor diagnosed her with breast cancer and told her she had 6 months to live. She told me she looked at the doctor and tell him, you may be the doctor, but you're not God. She lived over 40 years after she was told that. Now, suppose she had gone home and started fretting and writing out a will and start getting affairs in order. I'm not saying, you got to have faith to do those kind of things. If she had just done that and just sit down and start pining away, in 6 months, she would have been dead. You see, however, as we study this chapter, of which few sermons are made from, and few verses are claimed as promises, and few are remembered, the words are spoken by a broken man. Job's outburst is not mainly due to his physical suffering. It is more emotional, prompted by his losing touch with God. His grief and bankruptcy and painful sores caused him to say what he now says in Job chapter 3. His pain plays a role in it, but that is not the underlying cause. It isn't because he can't sleep at night. He is at the bottom of his emotional barrel because he has lost his best friend. For many years, you see, God seemed intimate. As his business grew and his camels multiplied, his crops were harvested, as profits began to pour in, blessing him and his family with enormous prosperity, he and God remained on speaking terms. They walked hand in hand until that awful day when everything seemed to broke loose. As mentioned earlier in chapter 1 and 2, he lost all of his animals, their home, their 10 children, and finally his health. In all this, we must give Job's wife some credit. She had 7 sons and 3 daughters for him, and she did not complain at their death, nor at the loss of all their wealth. However, when Satan in his second test struck Job with malignant ulcers from head to toe, she said to curse God and die. She did not leave Job, though she claimed she could not bear his breath. That was terrible, but this was not what depressed him. His real darkness came when the heavens became like brass, when God no longer walked with him in the cool of the evening, when God no longer spoke to him and assured him with words like, my son, let me explain all of what this is about to you. Satan came and dared me that you will curse me. I know you would not do that. Furthermore, I want you to know that I'm right here with you through all of this. Job knew none of that. He was just living in the consequence of those horrific events. And worst of all, God is silent and he seems absent. The man has reached at the end of his rope. You've been there. This was the day you had a door that slammed shut on you. This was the day someone closed the door and told you, leave me alone. Job now sitting at the city dump with his head shaved, his wife wringing her hands, his 3 friends sitting and staring in silence for 7 days and nights and no hope from above. After all, he opened his mouth and out came, I wish I had not been born. And that's all he said in Job chapter 3 and verse 10. You see, Job is depressed. Job further said in Job chapter 3 and verse 3, let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, there is a male child conceived. In chapter 3, Job chapter 3 and verse 4, let the day be darkness. Let not God regard it from above, neither let the light shine upon it. Let darkness and the shadow of death stain it. Let a cloud dwell upon it. Let the darkness of the day terrify it. As for the night, let darkness seize upon it. Let it be joined into the day of the year. Let it not come into the number of months. I'm down out of verse 7. Lo, let the night be solitary. Let no joyful voice come therein. Verse 8 or chapter 3. Let them curse it that curse the day, who are ready to raise up their morning. Let the stars of the twilight thereof be dark. Let it look for light, but have none. Neither let it see the dawning of day. Because it shut up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hid the sorrows from my eyes. These are all wish verbs. They present what Job is wishing. May this happen. May that happen. In verse 8, Job says, let them curse it that curse the day. You see, Job is not experienced in cursing. So he offers those who are familiar with such profane talk to pick up the cursing for him. I don't think he could have found a person, a message of hope to help him out. He perhaps would need to go down to one of the docks. You see, Job never turned his back on God. He does not curse God but he does curse the day he was born. In fact, Job takes his complaint to God over and over again. Church today, anyone ever had a Job moment when you felt like giving up? You just got a loan for your brand new car, and on Monday morning, your boss called you and to tell you the company is downsizing and they have to let you go. You dropped your child to school that morning, everything is going fine. You just pull off singing religious tone, and the principal called you to let you know that your child was taken in with a few other children by the police for gun possession. You practice all the good, helpful habits, temperance in all things, eating in the little 8-inch plate that Sister Anna showed us, and 3/4 of your meal is your vegetables, and just a little portion is your veggie burger, your veggie whatever, and you're temperate in all things, and you do your physical exam, and the doctor tells you that there's some unusual growth, and they have to do further testing. Perhaps your child has made you so embarrassed and shame, stealing, doing drugs, prostitution, all kind of things that you wish they were not born. Does life ever become so difficult for you? Are there times when you think you can bear it no more? When the hurricanes of this world come and the devastation that they bring tear you down, do you ever feel all alone with your cares and problems? Well, Pastor Frank Graff did. But out of his despair came a song that has encouraged so many since its writing in the 1900s. Pastor Graff had gone through a deep, heartbreaking experience. He was to later say, my whole attitude, and because of this, I was living a life of unhappiness and failure. With each passing day, I fell deeper and deeper into despair until finally I could stand it no longer. The good pastor began to sing a hymn that has been born out of a sad experience. Does Jesus care when my heart is pain, too deep for mirth or song? As the burdens press and the cares distress, and the way seems weary and long. Oh yes, he cares. I know he cares. His heart is touched with my grief. When the days are weary and the long night dreary, I know my Savior cares. Does Jesus cares when my way is dark, with a nameless dread and fear? As the daylight fades into deep night shades, does he care enough to be near? Many of you have watched the sports of boxing. Sometimes during the boxing match, the stronger of the two opponents would beat up on the other one so bad the trainer would throw in a towel to say enough is enough. With all the crime and lawlessness in our country today, many of you have thrown in the towel on your social life. It's home, work, and church. There's so many areas I refuse to drive to during the day, judge the night. On the job, you've been overlooked for a promotion. At home, your marriage is on the rocks. In church, it's Happy Sabbath, brother so-and-so and sister so-and-so, but no one really knows deep down the hurt that you carry. Many times it seems that the person who sliced the economic pie always seems to eat your slice. You struggle to make ends meet living from paycheck to paycheck, and you try to wear a smile when deep down there is a frown. Nobody knows but Jesus. There are 4 deadly deeds Satan uses as weapons. The first and second are discouragement and disappointment. They are twins. I repeat them, discouragement and disappointment. Once you open the door to disappointment, you will find discouragement dashing in right behind it. Satan's goal is to weaken you, to dishearten you, and to make you lose courage. Once discouragement enters your camp, it may seem like everything is going for you downhill. The third D is dejection. This is the lowliness of spirit. When you feel tired, emotionally fatigued, and your ability to cope with difficult situations is at a dangerous low. This is a precarious position to be in. And if you're at that point in life, you need to be aware that this is not the time to make significant decisions. Dejection unchecked will go into our 4D, which is despair. One who is in despair has abandoned hope. His or her mind has become numb. Thinking, decision-making, or just simply getting through the day all seems impossible. These individuals only appear to go through the motion. Those who find themselves in despair usually feel abandoned by God. All these times, the enemy would whisper unbelievable things in your mind, and Satan's schemes are so clever, he always makes them seem that is your thoughts rather than his. Often, on the times of dejection and despair, it will seem easier to quit than to face life. One thought may even turn to death. Why fight it any longer? There's no way out. And then at this time, many people commit suicide. You have called and called for help until you're too tired to call anymore. You have tried and tried until you're too tired to try anymore. You want to abandon ship. Is there a cure? The psalmist David asks, why are you despair, O my soul, in Psalms 42:25? He was given a cure. Further, in Hebrews 13:5, God himself says, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you. When you are feeling despair, you ought to walk by faith and not by your feelings. Let's go back to our story. In Job chapter 3 and verse 11, Job says, why did I not perish at birth? Why did I not perish when I came from the womb? In other words, Job is wishing that he was an abortion. Why did the knees that receive me? Or why the breasts which I should nurse? Isn't it ironic? There are times in our lives when you can identify with what Job is saying, but the reality is all this complaining isn't changing anything. The only thing that is being accomplished is the venting of your anger. He is not changing the circumstance, his condition, nor God's will. He is determined to let his friends know how he feels. If we are honest with ourselves, as we look back, most of the times that we have complained about the most is little that we could have done under those circumstances. In most cases, we only made a mess of things rather than try to clean things up. Many times, we have to go through many apologies and repentance. In Job chapter 13-24, Job has 2 great wishes through the rest of this chapter. He wished he had not been born. Anybody ever felt that way? You wish you had not been born? And even though he was born, he wishes he had been a stillbirth. Job at this point in his life sees death as a relief from the pain, and he sees death as the great equalizer. In verse 17, the wicked cease from troubling, and the weary ones at rest. Do you know of any wicked people? Some of you all know wicked people? I heard someone once saying that somebody was so wicked, they said they were wicked from wicked first came out. Job, in fact, he compares his death to hidden treasures in verse 21. He would prefer death to life. Job has definitely lost it. He has lost his purpose for life. He has lost his sense of God's justice. And most important, he has lost his sense of God's purpose in his life. At this point in his suffering, he can see absolutely no reason for living. Message of hope. I'm here to tell you that God loves us with a perfect love. Fear is to Satan what faith is to God. Satan operates on the basis of fear, and that's what immobilizes you. He will parade before you the fear of death, the fear of failure, the fear of criticism, the fear of rejection, the fear of having your weakness exposed for all to see. All this fine is rooted in pride. The story is told of a man and his wife. They were married for some 20 years, and they had 7 children. He kept begging his wife to have another child. He just loved children, like me, I guess. And finally, he consented and had another boy. But this child was born an albino. You know what albino is? You know, no color. This story happened before computers and access to research information was so easy, and the man could not seem to understand this, why his child came out white. Granted, he was of a dark complexion and his wife of a brown complexion. Year after year, he questioned the child. He questioned his wife about the child. His friends teased him that the child was different to his other children, and it got to a point that it made him sick, and he started to stress and worry about how this albino child could have been his child. He was so stressed that it started to break down his immune system. And once that happened, sickness started to step in. Finally, he got so sick from depression that he had to go to the hospital years later, and as his health started to deteriorate, just worrying constantly about the looks of that child and where that child fitted in with the other children. His organs began to shut down. He had it bad. And as he lay dying and his wife at his bedside, he mustered up enough energy and told her to please answer one last question for him. He says, honey, just answer me this one last question. We've been married over 30 years with 7 beautiful children. Please tell me the truth about that child, he whispered to her. Honey, is that white child really mine? She looked at him on the hospital bed with the drips and the machines, all showing his declining health. With tears in her eyes, she said, honey, that's the only one that's really yours. It is not the will of God that his people should be weighed down with care. Many of us, because of anxiety, tends to give us sickness, and sickness tends on to bring disease. So the Lord says in Ministry of Healing, when wrongs have been righted, we may present the needs of the sick to the Lord in calm faith, as his spirit may indicate. He knows every individual by name and cares for each as if there were not another upon the earth for whom he gave his beloved son. Let me say it again. When we present the need of the sick to people, God cares for each person as if they were the only person on the face of the earth. You see, because God love is so great and so unfailing, the sick should be encouraged to trust in him and be cheerful. To be anxious about themselves tend to cause weakness and disease. If they will rise above depression and gloom, their prospect of recovery will be better. For the eye of the Lord is upon them that hope in mercy. You should not stress yourself out with mind games. Too many persons walk around with too many baggage that they don't need. You know, half the things we worry about ain't gonna happen. Many of us worry right now about COVID. Everywhere we see, we go, we have to sanitize our hands, we gotta be careful. And some people even afraid to even come out right now. I know a guy right now, personally, he always go to the same barber shop that I go to. I haven't seen him in a while. I was asking the barber, I said, I don't see him coming no more. He says, man, he would call me either come very early in the morning or very late in the evening. So he is actually literally staying inside. He's afraid of catching COVID. You see, the only security blanket we were ever meant to have is the Lord himself. Many people, even Christians, spend more time working and entertaining themselves than they do learning about whom they will spend eternity with. Today, church, Jesus has gone through more than we would ever go through. Hebrews chapter 15, verse 16 tells us, for we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but when all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. In the Desire of Ages, page 471, the servant of the Lord points out, the history of Job has shown that suffering is inflicted by Satan and is overruled by God for the purposes of mercy. You see, church, every tub has to stand on its own bottom. What Papa, Mama, Uncle, Auntie, brother, or sister goes through is only their preparation for eternity. I urge you to stay connected with God. God wants a relationship with each and every one of us. He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. He will never mislead us. He will never forget us. You see, when you fall, or when I fall, he lifts me up. When I fail, he forgives. When you are weak, he is strong. When you are lost, he is the way. When you are afraid, he is courage. When you stumble, he will steady you. When you are broken, he will mend you. When you are blind, he will lead you. When you are hungry, God will feed you. When you face trials, he'll be with you. When you face persecution, he will shield you. When you face a problem, he will comfort you. When you face loss, he will provide for you. When you face death, he will carry you home. We need to live with our focus on heaven and eternity and not on the here and now. Too many of us focus on our situation and not on our revelation. Two men want to occupy the hospital room at the same time. Both of these men were seriously ill. One man was allowed to sit up in his bed for an hour each afternoon to help drain the fluid from his lungs. His room was right next. His bed was right next to the only window in that room. The other man had to spend all of his time flat on his back. The men talked for hours at a time. They spoke of their wives, their families, their homes, their jobs, their involvement in the military service, and where they'd been on vacation. Each afternoon, when the man in the bed by the window would sit up, he would pass time by describing to his roommate all the things he could see out the window. The man in the other bed began to live for those 1 hour periods where the world would be broadened and enlivened by all the activity and the color of the outside world. The window overlooked a park with a beautiful lake. Ducks and swan played on the water while children sailed their little boats. Young lovers walked in arms amid the flowers of every color, and a fine view of the city skyline could be seen in the distance. As the man in the window described all this in exquisite details, the man on the other side of the bed would close his eyes and just imagine the picture. One warm afternoon, the man by the window described a parade passing. Although the man could not hear the band, the other man could not hear the band, he could see in his mind's eye as the gentleman by the window portrayed all of this with descriptive words. Days passed by, weeks passed by, months passed by, as the man at the window would say so many encouraging things and describe all of what was happening outside to his friend who lay flat on his back in the other bed. But Satan got into the man's heart who laid flat on his back, and he wished that he was the one that was by that window. One day, or one night, I should say, the man at the window, he got very sick. Somehow, the proper position that he was normally in, that the fluids don't fill his lungs, he managed to slouch down in his bed, and he began to cough. He began to cough. He tried to reach for the button to call for emergency help. The other man, he noticed what was going on with him. He thought for a minute, let him press his button and call the nurse. But he says, if he does that, then perhaps when help comes, the man would live. And Satan put in his mind not to press his emergency button. He did not try to help his friend. That morning, when the nurse arrived to bring water for their baths, they found the body of the lifeless man by the window. He died peacefully in his sleep. She was saddened and called the hospital attendants to take the body away. But as soon as the time seemed appropriate, the other man asked if he could move next to the window. The nurse was happy to make the switch, and after making sure he was comfortable, she left him alone. Slowly, painfully, he propped himself up on his elbows to look outside at the real world. He strained to slowly look outside the window beside the bed, to notice that it only faced a blank wall. The man asked the nurse would have compelled his deceased roommate, who had described such wonderful scenes outside the window. The nurse responded that the man was blind and could not even see the wall. She said, perhaps he just wanted to encourage you. There is tremendous happiness in making others happy, despite your own situation. Shared grief is half the sorrow, but happiness when shared is double. If you want to feel rich, just count on all the things that money can buy. Today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. God says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. The price of everything today is going up on earth. Groceries are going up on the roof. Gas, ridiculous. Land, not affordable on most of our salaries. I urge you today to have peace and contentment in this world today. You have your mind set on things eternal. Remember, whatever you're going through, remember however dismal it seems, is always darkest just before dawn. You've come too far to throw in the towel. The single reason remember Job with such admiration is because he endured. Today, church, I want to say, when this battle is over, we are all promised, if we are faithful, to wear a crown. Ellen White tells us in a book Heaven title, she says, on Heaven, she says, we all hold title deeds to real estate in the kingdom of glory. Well, I don't think you all understand that. You know, when you're buying a piece of property, they got to search the deed and all of that kind of stuff. Make sure the person who's selling it to you ain't and sell it to somebody else, and it ain't tie up in some family. They don't want to come back and say they will this to me. And, you know, land has caused plenty problems, you know. Any of y'all know that? Plenty problems. But she says, we hold title deeds to real estate in the kingdom of glory. Never were title deed drawn up more strictly according to law or signed more legibly than those that give God's people a right to heavenly mansion. When God give you a mansion, that's yours. Anybody's come out and claim that? Let not your heart be troubled, Christ says. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I wouldn't have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again. I like that part. He didn't say he's sending somebody first, you know. I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there he may be also. This is why it says in heaven, we will try to recall some of the greatest trials we had on earth, but they will seem so small with the far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory that surround us that we couldn't even speak them out. You see, when we see Jesus, these trials would all seem like nothing. When I think of the love that God has for us, I think of the price that he has paid for you and for me, then these trials of this world will seem like nothing compared to that Calvary. It don't matter how things look dim. It don't matter how high the murder count go. It no matter how high the suicide go. It no matter how the COVID dashboard look. No matter how rough it gets, hold on. Keep your eye on the prize. When this battle is over, we are guaranteed to wear a crown. When Satan plays mind games with you, remember, on Christ, the solid rock I stand. And remember, because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know who hold the future, that indeed life is worth a living just because he lives.
Amen. Because he lives, one day we'll all be marching to Zion. Let us stand and sing number 422. Come we that love the Lord, and let our joys be known. 422.